आइसिएससी 2021 को निम्ति हामी विद्यार्थीहरूलाई नेपाली विषयको पाठ्यक्रम अन्तर्गत विभिन्न पाठहरू पढाउने क्रममा छौँ। यसभन्दा अघि हामीले 3वटा कविता विद्यार्थीहरूको निम्ति पुरा गरिसकेका छौँ। सर्वप्रथम हामीले कर्म कविता पढ्यौँ, रामभरत संवाद कविता पढ्यौँ, काल महिमा पनि पढ्यौँ र आज हामी महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा शीर्षक कविता पढ्न लागिरहेका छौँ र विद्यार्थीहरूलाई सधैँ जस्तो आज पनि म हार्दिक अनुरोध गरिरहेको छु। यो लकडाउनको समयमा घरमै बसेर भए पनि यो अनलाइन शिक्षाको फाइदा लिने अनि घरमै बसेर राम्रोसँग पढ्ने अनि पढाएका विषयहरू, पढाएका अध्यायहरू राम्रोसँग ध्यानसँग सुनेर यसबाट विभिन्न प्रश्नहरूको उत्तरको तयारी विद्यार्थीहरूले घरमा बसेर गर्ने, पढ्ने अभ्यास निरन्तर जारी राख्ने, लेख्ने अभ्यास निरन्तर जारी राख्ने म विद्यार्थीहरूलाई समग्र हाम्रो 10औं श्रेणीका विद्यार्थीहरूलाई म आग्रह गर्न चाहन्छु। र आइसिएससी 2021 अन्तर्गत नेपाली विषयको हामी पढाइ गरिरहेका छौँ। साहित्य कुञ्जबाट आइसिएससी साहित्य कुञ्ज जो हाम्रो पाठ्यक्रममा परेको छ, यहाँबाट विद्यार्थीहरूलाई पढाउने क्रम चलिरहेको छ र आज म विद्यार्थीहरूलाई मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा शीर्षक कविता पढाउन लागिरहेको छु र यस कविताका कवि हुन् महाकवि अथवा आँसुकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा। र कविता पढ्नुभन्दा अघि हामी महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटालाई जान्नेछौँ, लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटालाई चिन्नेछौँ। त्यसपछि कवितामाथि म व्याख्या अथवा कवितामाथि सविस्तार चर्चा गर्नेछु। महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा, महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा कविहरूमा पनि महान कवि, उहाँलाई महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा भनेर चिन्छौँ। अनि देवकोटालाई हामी आँसु कवि भनेर पनि चिन्छौँ। आँसु कवि भन्नुको अर्थ हो जति बेला चाह्यो त्यति बेला नै कविता सृजना गर्ने शक्ति भएका कवि, अथवा कुनै पनि समय देवकोटालाई कविता लेख्नु पर्यो भनेदेखि त्यति बेलै जहाँ बसेर पनि जुनसुकै अवस्थामा पनि कविता सृजना गर्ने, कविता लेख्ने शक्ति भएका कवि। उनलाई बेसी सोचिरहनु पर्दैन थियो, समय लिइरहनु पर्दैन थियो, तत्कालै कविता सृजना गर्न सक्थे। त्यही कारण लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटालाई महाकवि भनेर भनिन्छ अथवा आँसु कवि भनेर भनिन्छ। लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको जन्म 13 नोभेम्बर 1909 मा भएको थियो। काठमाडौँको धोबीधारामा लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको जन्म भएको थियो। नेपाली साहित्यका एक प्रतिभाशाली, बहुमुखी प्रतिभाका धनी महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको जन्म काठमाडौँको धोबीधारामा जन्म 13 नोभेम्बर 1909 मा उनको जन्म भएको थियो भने मृत्यु 15 सेप्टेम्बर 1959 मा 15 सेप्टेम्बर 1959 मा महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको निधन भयो। 50 वर्षको उमेर देवकोटा बाँचे र 50 वर्षको उमेरमा देवकोटाले नेपाली साहित्यको विकासमा प्रशस्तै योगदान दिएको हामी पाउँछौँ। नेपाली साहित्यको श्रीवृद्धिमा लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको योगदान महत्त्वपूर्ण छ। जति जति हामी नेपाली साहित्यको कुरा गर्छौँ, नेपाली साहित्यको कुरा गर्दा यदि महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको नाम लिएन भने साहित्य, नेपाली साहित्य नै अधुरो हुन्छ। लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा यस्ता प्रतिभाशाली व्यक्ति हुन् जसले नेपाली भाषा, नेपाली साहित्यको निम्ति प्रशस्तै योगदान दिएका छन्। यसैले उनलाई महाकवि अथवा आँसु कविको रूपमा हामी चिन्छौँ। र 50 वर्षको साहित्य साधनामा अथवा 50 वर्षको आफ्नो जीवन यात्रामा लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले नेपाली साहित्यको विकासमा प्रशस्त योगदान दिएका छन्। कवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा नेपाली साहित्यका एक महान बहुमुखी प्रतिभाका व्यक्ति हुन्। उनको जन्म नेपालको काठमाडौँको धोबीधारा टोलमा भएको थियो। लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको लेखन शक्ति अद्वितीय छ, महान छ उनको लेखन शैली। उनले 10 वर्षको उमेरदेखि कविता लेख्न सुरु गरेका थिए। आफ्नो जन्म भएको 10 वर्षदेखि नै, 10 वर्षको उमेरमा पुग्दादेखि नै उनले नेपाली साहित्यमा कलम चलाउन थाले। कविता लेखनमा उनको लेखन क्रम सुरु भयो। 10 वर्षको उमेरमा छँदादेखि नै उनले कविता लेख्न सुरु गरे। 10 दिनभित्रमा नै सुलोचना महाकाव्य लेखे। एउटा महाकाव्य है, एउटा महाकाव्य भनेको एउटा जीवनको सुरुदेखि अन्तैसम्मको कथा पूर्ण एउटा कृति महाकाव्य केवल 10 दिनभित्रमा लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले लेखेर सिद्ध्याए। 3 महिनामा नै शाकुन्तला महाकाव्य लेखे। उनले शाकुन्तला महाकाव्य 3 महिनाभित्रमा लेखिसके। कवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा रोमान्टिक कवि हुन्। अब यहाँनिर रोमान्टिक कवि भनेका छन्। रोमान्टिक कवि भन्नुको अर्थ हो, रोमान्टिक भन्नुको अर्थ हो नेपालीमा यसलाई स्वच्छन्दतावाद भनेर भनिन्छ। अब स्वच्छन्दतावाद भनेको त विद्यार्थीहरूलाई के हो यो अचम्मको कुरा भन्ने लाग्छ होला। अब रोमान्टिसिजम अथवा स्वच्छन्दतावाद भनेको चाहिँ के हो भन्दाखेरि नेचरलाई हेरेर साहित्य लेख्ने अथवा प्रकृतिलाई हेरेर साहित्य लेख्नु, प्रकृतिबाट प्रेरित हुनु, प्रकृतिलाई नजिक राखेर प्रकृतिसँग नजिकिएर प्रकृतिको अवस्था प्रकृतिलाई हेरेर प्रकृतिको स्थितिलाई हेरेर साहित्य सृजना गर्नु नै रोमान्टिसिजम अथवा स्वच्छन्दतावाद हो। लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा स्वच्छन्दतावादी कवि थिए अथवा रोमान्टिक कवि थिए भनेर यहाँ भनिएको छ। रोमान्टिक कवि भन्नुको अर्थ लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा प्रकृति प्रेमी थिए, प्रकृतिलाई मन पराउँथे, प्रकृतिलाई रुचाउँथे, नेचरलाई हेरेर उनी साहित्य लेख्ने गर्थे। यसै कारण लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटालाई रोमान्टिक कवि भनेर भनिएको छ। नेपाली साहित्यलाई रोमान्टिक धारामा प्रवेश गराउने उनी विशेष व्यक्ति हुन्। नेपाली साहित्यमा रोमान्टिसिजमको सुरु गर्ने अथवा रोमान्टिसिजमको सूत्रपात गर्ने व्यक्तिमा एक महान व्यक्तिको रूपमा हामी लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटालाई पाउँछौँ। लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाका प्रत्येक कृतिहरूमै स्वच्छन्दतावाद हामी पाउँछौँ अथवा प्रकृतिलाई हेरेर नेचरलाई हेरेर लेखेको पाउँछौँ। उनी प्रकृति प्रेमी थिए, प्रकृतिको नजिकमा रहेर प्रकृतिलाई हेरेर प्रकृतिलाई आदर्श मानेर साहित्य लेख्ने गर्थे। अनि यो जुन कृति हामी पढ्दैछौँ लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा शीर्षक कविता, यो पनि प्रकृतिलाई हेरेर नेचरलाई हेरेर नै लेखिएको कविता हो। नेपाली साहित्यमा आत्मपरक निबन्ध लेख्न प्रारम्भ गर्ने र नेपाली साहित्यलाई भरिपूर्ण बनाउने देवकोटा नै हुन्। नेपाली साहित्यमा एउटा निबन्ध दुई प्रकारको हुन्छ, एउटा वस्तुपरक हुन्छ, एउटा आत्मपरक हुन्छ। आत्मपरक भन्नुको अर्थ म भएर अथवा आफू पात्र भएर कुनै एउटा पात्र आफ्नै अवस्था अथवा आफ्नै कुरा, आफ्नै जीवनशैली अथवा आफ्नै स्थिति अथवा नेचर हो भने त्यो नेचरको कुनै एउटा पात्र आफै भएर लेख्नुलाई चाहिँ आत्मपरक भनेर भनिन्छ। लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा आत्मपरक निबन्ध लेख्ने र प्रारम्भ गर्ने एकजना व्यक्ति हुन्। उनले नै आत्मपरक निबन्ध लेख्न सुरु गरेका हुन् र नेपाली निबन्धलाई पनि आत्मपरक निबन्धलाई पनि उनले नेपाली निबन्ध साहित्यको फाँटलाई एउटा भरिपूर्ण बनाउने काम महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले गरेका छन् र उनी कवि मात्र होइन, एकजना सफल निबन्धकारको रूपमा पनि हामी देवकोटालाई पाउन सक्छौँ। उनका प्रकाशित कृतिहरू मुनामदन गीति काव्य हो। मुनामदनबाटै निकालिएको मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा शीर्षक कविता हामी पढ्न लागिरहेका छौँ। मुनामदन एउटा यस्तो गीति काव्य हो महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको। उनले यसमा एउटा दुखान्त कथा उतार्ने चेष्टा गरेका छन्। मुनामदन शीर्षक गीति काव्यमा दुखान्त एउटा अवस्था देखाउने चेष्टा गरेका छन्। मुना र मदन दुईजना पति पत्नी है, प्रेमी प्रेमिका अथवा पति पत्नी दुईजना पति पत्नी अनि मदनकी बुढी आमा घरमा दुःख गरेर जीवनयापन गर्नुपर्ने, सङ्घर्ष गर्नुपर्ने, घरमा पैसा रुपियाँ नभएपछि अभावमा जीवन व्यतीत गरिरहेको मदनको परिवार, सङ्घर्षको जीवन व्यतीत गरिरहेको मदनको परिवार एक दिन मदन पैसा कमाउनको निम्ति भोट जान्छ, लासा जान्छ। भोट गएर पैसा कमाउनु पर्ने एउटा बाध्यता घरकी आफ्नी पत्नीलाई, आफ्नी श्रीमतीलाई सुनको बाला बनाइदिने, एउटा पार्टी पौवा खडा गर्ने, आमाको सपना पनि पुरा गरिदिने, आफ्नो पत्नीको पनि सपना पुरा गरिदिने सोच राखेर मदन 2-4 पैसा कमाउनै पर्छ, छोरा भएपछि घरको आर्थिक अवस्थामा सुधार ल्याउनै पर्छ भन्ने सोच राखेर मदन भोट जान्छ। अनि भोट गएर 2-4 पैसा जोगाड गरेर कमाएर घर फर्किँदाखेरि मदनले भोग्नु परेको दुःख मदनले बाटोमा भोग्नु परेको कष्ट र दुःखलाई यो मुनामदन शीर्षक गीति काव्यमा खुबै राम्रो प्रकारले, खुबै मिठो तरिकाले, खुबै सरल तरिकाले वर्णन गर्ने काम लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले गरेका छन्। अत्यन्तै सरल तरिकाले, झ्याउरे छन्दमा अत्यन्तै सरल तरिकाले लेखिएको गीति काव्य हो मुनामदन लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको। र देवकोटाको मुनामदन सबैको मुखमा छ, सबैको मनमा छ, सबैको मानसपटमा बसिरहेको छ लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको मुनामदन। र देवकोटा स्वयंले पनि आफू मर्नभन्दा अघि देवकोटाले भनेका थिए, मेरो सबै कृति जलाइदिए हुन्छ, मलाई एउटा मुनामदन भए पुग्छ। मेरो निम्ति उनको मास्टरपिस, उनको जीवनको मास्टरपिस भनेको नै मुनामदन थियो। मुनामदन देवकोटा आफैले पनि आफ्नो कृतिलाई सबभन्दा धेर माया गर्थे भने मुनामदनलाई नै गर्थे। उनले सबभन्दा धेर जीवनमा रुचाएको अथवा आफूले मन पराएको कृति पनि मुनामदन थियो। र मुनामदनबाटै भित्रबाट निकालिएको मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा शीर्षक कविता आज हामी पढ्नेछौँ। त्यसपछि उनले लेखेका कृतिहरूमा कुञ्जिनी खण्डकाव्य, लुण्डी खण्डकाव्य, बसन्ती खण्डकाव्य, मेन्दु खण्डकाव्य, शकुन्तला महाकाव्य, सुलोचना महाकाव्य, वनकुसुम महाकाव्य, पुतली कविता सङ्ग्रह, भिखारी कविता सङ्ग्रह, छहरा कविता सङ्ग्रह, लक्ष्मी निबन्ध सङ्ग्रह, यो निबन्धको कृति, अनि सावित्री सत्यवान नाटक, यस्ता कृतिहरू थुप्रै कृतिहरू लेखेर नेपाली साहित्यको विकासमा महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले बहुमूल्य योगदान दिएका छन्। आज पाठ 9बाट हामी पढ्दैछौँ मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाद्वारा लिखित यो कविता, यो महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाद्वारा रचित मुनामदन गीति काव्यबाट निकालिएको गीति काव्यकै एक अंशको रूपमा यो मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा प्रस्तुत गरिएको छ। आइसिएससीको सिलेबसभित्र यसलाई गाभिएको छ। यो देवकोटाले यो मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदै भनेर त्यो शीर्षकमै कविता लेखेका सायद होइनन्। मुनामदनभित्र परेको कविताको अंशलाई निकालिएर यो खुबै सुन्दर पङ्क्तिहरू भएको र एउटा सन्देश, एउटा राम्रो सन्देश पनि दिने चेष्टा भएको कारणले गर्दा यो पङ्क्ति आइसिएससीको सिलेबसभित्र गाभिएको छ। यो कविताको अंश अथवा मुनामदनको एक अंशको रूपमा यहाँ राखिएको छ। अब हामी पढ्नेछौँ मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा, महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा यस कविताका कवि रचयिता। आगोको ज्वाला कताको होला, डढेलो उठ्यो कि मरेकालाई झन् मार्न भनी डढेलो उठ्यो कि। मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदै गरेको हुन्छ। अघि मैले भने 2-4 पैसा कमाएर आफ्नी पत्नीको हातमा सुनका बाला लगाइदिने, आमाको इच्छा पनि पुरा गरिदिने, पार्टी पौवा पनि बनाउने, समाजमा एउटा मानिस भएर जन्मेपछि सामाजिक कर्तव्य पनि पुरा गर्ने एउटा सोच राखेर जब मदन भोटतिर जान्छ, 2-4 पैसा कमाउनको निम्ति जान्छ, कमाएर फर्केर आएपछि केही दिन भोटमा बसेर पैसा जोगाड गरेर, पैसा कमाएर, काम गरेर पैसा कमाएर फर्केर आउँदै गर्दाखेरि बाटोमा मदन बिमारी हुन्छ। बाटोमा जङ्गलमा अलपत्र पर्छ। ऊ आउँदै गरेका सबै साथीहरूले मदन बाटोमा बिमार भएपछि बिमारी अवस्थाको साथीलाई सबैले छोडिराखेर अरू साथीहरू सबै घरतिर जान्छन्। अनि मदन चाहिँ हिँड्न नसक्ने अवस्थामा जङ्गलमा बसिरहेको हुन्छ। यस्तो अवस्थामा जङ्गलमा बसिरहेको बेलामा मदनले देख्छ कि आगोको ज्वाला कताको होला, डढेलो उठ्यो कि। जङ्गलमा आगोको ज्वाला देख्छ, आगो बलिरहेको उसले देख्छ। कताबाट डढेलो पो लाग्यो कि आगो पो लाग्यो कि जङ्गलमा भन्ने उसलाई लाग्छ। अनि आफू बिमारी अवस्थामा छ मदन। बिमारी अवस्थामा रहेको मदनले मरेकालाई झन् मार्न भनी डढेलो उठ्यो कि। म त मरिसकेको छु, यस्तो बिमारी अवस्थामा छु, लाचार अवस्थामा छु। अनि लाचार अवस्थामा भएको व्यक्तिलाई अब जङ्गलमा आगो लाग्दैछ, डढेलो सल्किँदैछ, त्यो सल्केर आयो भने त म त मर्छु, मरेको त्यसै त मरेको जस्तो भइरहेको छु, मरेको माथि झन् मार्न भनेर यो डढेलो उठ्यो कि भनेर मदनले सम्झिन्छ। मदनलाई लाग्छ नजिकै आयो मानिस एउटा लिएर चिराक, तर आगो लाग्यो, डरलाग्दो डढेलो लाग्यो क्या हो भनेर यसो हेरेको त उसले त एउटा व्यक्ति, एउटा मान्छे पो आउँदै गरेको देख्छ। एउटा मान्छे चिराग भनेको एउटा उज्यालो ज्योति बत्ती बालेर उज्यालो बत्ती बालेर एउटा व्यक्ति आफूतिरै आउँदै गरेको त्यो जङ्गल बिचमा आफूतिरै आउँदै गरेको उसले देख्छ। नजिकै आयो मानिस एउटा लिएर चिराग, डाकु पो हो कि भूत पो हो कि वनको खराब। अब वन जङ्गलमा बसेको छ, कतै डाकु चोर्ने चोर व्यक्ति पो हो कि चोरी गर्न पो आएको हो कि है, अथवा जङ्गलको भूत पो हो कि भन्ने उसलाई लाग्छ। आफूतिरै आउँदैछ एउटा व्यक्ति, उसले सम्झिन्छ कतै डाकु पो हो कि 2-4 पैसा कमाएर आमालाई केही गरिदिन्छु, आफ्नी पत्नीको निम्ति केही गरिदिन्छु भनेर सोच राखेर पैसा कमाउन गएर फर्केर आएको, बाटोमै जङ्गलमा बिमार परेर बसिरहेको छ मदन। अनि यसरी जङ्गलमा बिमार परेर बसिरहेको व्यक्ति उताबाट चिराग लिएर उज्यालो बत्ती लिएर आउँदै गरेको एउटा व्यक्ति देख्दा कतै वनको भूत पो हो कि डाकु पो हो कि आफूतिरै आउँदैछ, अब मलाई के पो गर्छ कि यसले भनेर ऊ चिन्तित हुन्छ। वनमा विभिन्न प्रकारका यस्ता खराब चिजहरू हुन्छन्। पयोमा एउटा झुन्डेको सास, के भएर के डर, भएको बेला गलाको पुग्छ चिराग पल्तिर। त्यो एउटा देहमा, उसको देहमा त्यो सास मात्र अल्झिरहेको छ। देहमा के अल्झिरहेको छ? एउटा सास मात्र अल्झिरहेको छ। सास भनेको प्राण मात्रै अल्झिरहेको छ। ऊ त्यति साह्रो लाचार छ, बिमारी भएर अशक्त छ, ऊ हिँड्न नसक्ने अवस्थामा त्यहाँ लाचार भएर बसिरहेको छ। यस्तो अवस्थामा त्यो देहमा, त्यो शरीरमा के छ? केवल प्राण मात्रै अल्झेको छ, प्राण मात्रै अल्झिरहेको छ। यस्तो अवस्थामा के डर पो मान्नु र के पो हो यो, के पो आउँदैछ, अब जे होला भनेर ऊ बस्छ। भएको बल गलाको पुग्छ चिराग पर्छ। र पनि उसले भित्रबाट आवाज एउटा सुस्केरा निकालेर एउटा उसलाई मनभित्र भएको वेदना उसले व्यक्त गर्ने चेष्टा गर्छ। अनि त्यो आवाज चाहिँ, त्यो बल निकालेर उसले निकालेको आवाज, उसको सुस्केरा, उसको वेदना चाहिँ त्यो चिरागदेखि पल्तिर भनेको त्यो उज्यालोदेखि अघिसम्म पुग्छ। को रुन्छ भनी भोटेले हेर्छ, देख्दछ बिमारी। त्यति बेला उसको आवाज, उसले गरेको क्रन्दन, उसको रोदन, ऊ रुएको आवाज जब सुन्छ, त्यति बेला त्यो आउँदै गरेको व्यक्ति, एउटा भोटे व्यक्ति, उसले देख्दछ एउटा बिमारी भएर एउटा मान्छे जङ्गलमा बसिरहेको अवस्थामा उसले देख्छ। मायाले भन्छ, साथी र भाइ रहेछ हरामी। अब त्यो भोटेले के भन्छ? कस्तो खालको साथी रहेछ हौ, हेर यस्तो अवस्थामा एउटा बिमारी बसिरहेको छ, कस्तो हरामी साथीहरू रहेछ, बिच बाटोमै छोडेर जाने। एउटा साथीलाई बिमारी भएको छ, बिमारी अवस्थामा रहेको साथीलाई दबाई दिनु, हेरचाह गर्नु अथवा उसलाई स्याहार गरेर बस्नुको सट्टा छोडेर जाने कस्तो साथीहरू रहेछ भनेर त्यो भोटेले भन्छ। मेरो छ घर 1 कोस पर, तिमी त मर्दैन, म बोकी लान्छु, हुन्छ कि हुन्न फरक पर्दैन। अब त्यो भोटे दाइले मदनलाई भन्छ, मेरो 1 कोस टाढा मेरो घर छ, तिमीलाई केही पर्दैन, तिमी मर्दैनौ, तिमी जाति हुन्छौ, तिमीलाई म जाति बनाउँछु, तिमीलाई म सहारा दिन्छु, म बोकेर लान्छु, हुन्छ कि हुँदैन, तिमीलाई म बोक्छु, म बोकेर लान्छु, हुन्छ कि हुँदैन, केही फरक पर्छ कि पर्दैन भनेर मदनलाई, त्यो बिमारी अवस्थामा रहेको जङ्गलमा बसिरहेको मदनलाई त्यो भोटेले सोध्छ। भोटेको पाउ समाई भन्छ, बिचारा मदन, ईश्वर मेरो हे भोटे दाई क्या राम्रो वचन। उसले भन्छ, भोटेको पाउ समाई भन्छ बिचारा मदन, कसैको सहारा नपाएको बेसहारा भएर बसिरहेको मदन, दुःख सहेर त्यस्तो अवस्थामा बिचल्नी परेर बसिरहेको मदनले सहारा पाउँदा, त्यो भोटे दाईको सहारा पाउँदाखेरि उसको खुट्टै पक्डिन्छ, उसको खुट्टा पक्डिन्छ। अनि पाउ भनेको खुट्टा समातेर उसले भन्छ, यस्तो अवस्थामा म छु, तपाईँले यति मिठो वचन, यति राम्रो वचन मेरो लागि गरिदिनु भयो, मेरो लागि तपाईँले यति राम्रो सोचिदिनु भयो भनेर उसले भन्छ। घरमा मेरी छन् बुढी आमा, ती सेतै फुलेकी। घरमा, हे भोटे दाई, मेरो घरमा एउटी बुढी आमा छन्, सेतै केस फुलेको बुढी आमा छन् मेरो घरमा। घरमा मेरी जहान एउटी बत्ती झैँ बलेकी। अनि घरमा मेरो जहान, मेरो पत्नी पनि छ, पत्नी पनि मेरो घरमा छ। पत्नी मेरो बत्ती जस्तो उज्यालो एकदमै राम्री सुन्दरी मुना पनि मेरो घरमा छ। आमा वृद्ध अवस्थामा छिन्, बुढी छिन्। बुढी आमा छिन्, सेतै केस फुलेकी वृद्ध अवस्थाकी मेरी आमा छन्। अनि मेरी पत्नी जो सुन्दरी छ, बत्ती जस्तो बलेकी छ। मलाई आज बचाइदेऊ, ईश्वरले हेर्नेछ। हे भोटे दाई, म तिम्रो शरणमा पर्छु, मलाई आज बचाइदेऊ, मलाई बचाइदेऊ भनेदेखि तिमीलाई चाहिँ ईश्वरले हेर्नेछ भनेर यसरी अनुनय विनय, यसरी आग्रह गर्छ, यसरी बिन्ती गर्छ मदनले भोटे दाईलाई। मानिसलाई मद्दत गर्ने स्वर्गमा पर्नेछ। जसले एउटा व्यक्तिलाई साह्रो परेको छ, जो मान्छे दुःखमा छ, जो मान्छे विपत्तिमा छ, विपत्तिमा परेको व्यक्तिलाई सहयोग गर्नु मानवीय कर्तव्य हो, मानवीय धर्म हो, त्यो मानवता हो। मान्छेलाई सहयोग गर्नु, मान्छेले आपत परेको बेलामा मान्छेलाई सहयोग गर्नु यो मानवताको कुरा हो अथवा मानवताको धर्म हो। मानिसलाई मद्दत गर्ने स्वर्गमा पर्नेछ। यो जसले सहयोग गर्छ, दुःख परेको व्यक्तिलाई सहयोग गर्छ, ऊ स्वर्गमा जान्छ भनेर भनिएको छ। छेत्रीको छोरो यो घिनले हुँदैन, मानिस ठुलो दिलले हुन्छ, जातले हुँदैन। अब यहाँनिर खुबै राम्रो कुरा महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले गरेका छन्। सायद महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले छेत्रीको छोरो यो पाउच हुन्छ, घिनाले हुँदैन, मानिस ठुलो दिलले हुन्छ, जातले हुँदैन, यति भन्नको निम्ति सायद मुनामदन गीतिकाव्य लेखे। मुनामदन लेख्नुको लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको तात्पर्य पनि यति नै, यही दुईटा लाइन थियो। यही दुई लाइन प्रमुख कुरा भन्नको निम्ति महाकवि देवकोटाले मुनामदन गीतिकाव्य नै लेखे। छेत्रीको छोरो यो पाउच हुन्छ, घिनाले छुँदैन, मानिस ठुलो दिलले हुन्छ, जातले हुँदैन। मान्छे चाहिँ ठुलो चाहिँ दिलले हुन्छ। त्यति बेला जात प्रथा थियो हाम्रो समाजमा। जुन जात प्रथाको विरोध गरेका छन् यहाँ देवकोटाले भनेका छन्, मान्छे ठुलो चाहिँ जातले होइन, मान्छे ठुलो धर्म र जातले होइन, जातले मान्छे ठुलो हुँदैन, तर उसको कर्मले ऊ ठुलो हुन्छ, उसको व्यवहारले ऊ ठुलो हुन्छ। छेत्रीको छोरो यो पाउच हुन्छ, घिनाले छुँदैन। म छेत्रीको छोरा हो, तर म भोटे दाईको म खुट्टा समाउँछु, म पाउ पर्छु, तपाईँको पाउ छुन्छु, म घिनले होइन, घिनले छुँदिनँ। म तपाईँको जुन कर्म छ, तपाईँले जुन राम्रो काम गर्नुभएको छ, त्यो राम्रो कामको निम्ति म पाउ समाउँछु, खुट्टा समाउँछु। अनि मान्छे चाहिँ ठुलो दिलले हुन्छ, जातले हुँदैन। मान्छे ठुलो चाहिँ केले हुन्छ? दिलले हुन्छ। मान्छेको सोच र विचारले हुन्छ, मान्छेको मन र मस्तिष्कले हुन्छ। ठुलो चाहिँ त्यो जातले चाहिँ हुँदैन। मानिस ठुलो दिलले हुन्छ, जातले हुँदैन। यहाँ जातको कुरा गरेर यो जात ठुलो, यो जात सानो भन्ने छ। जुन जात प्रथाको कुरा थियो, आज हाम्रो समाजबाट यो चिजहरू हट्दै जाँदैछ। तथापि कहीँ कतै अझै पनि हाम्रो समाजमा सायद बाँचिरहेको हुनसक्छ। र यहाँनिर लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले एउटा महान सन्देश दिने चेष्टा गरेका छन् यो कविताको माध्यमबाट। हामी हाम्रो कर्मले ठुलो हुनुपर्छ, हामी हाम्रो मन र मस्तिष्कले ठुलो हुनुपर्छ, हामी हाम्रो विचारले ठुलो हुनुपर्छ, हाम्रो सोचाइ र हाम्रो काम गराइले हामी ठुलो हुनुपर्छ। यहाँ जातले कोही व्यक्ति पनि ठुलो हुँदैन। हाम्रो कर्मले, हाम्रो काम गराइले, हाम्रो सोचले, हाम्रो मन र मस्तिष्कले हामी ठुलो हुनुपर्छ भन्ने कुरा कविले दर्शाउने चेष्टा गरेका छन्। छेत्रीको छोरो यो पाउच हुन्छ, घिनले छुँदैन, मानिस ठुलो दिलले हुन्छ, जातले हुँदैन। यहाँ खुबै राम्रो एउटा सन्देश, मानवताको सन्देश लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले दिएका छन्। यो कविताको माध्यमबाट मानवताको सन्देश छर्ने चेष्टा महाकवि देवकोटाले गरेका छन्। बोकेर लग्यो भोटेले घर, उनमा बिसायो, पानीको गुटका पिलाइदियो, दयाले रसायो। अब त्यो भोटे दाईले मदनलाई बोकेर लान्छ उसको घरमा, अनि उनमा बिसायो भनेको, उन भनेको भेडाको रौँद्वारा बनाइएको, सायद त्यो भेडाको रौँद्वारा बनिएको राडी हुनसक्छ अथवा कुनै बिछ्याउना हुनसक्छ। त्यो बिछ्याउनामा त्यो उनमा लगेर उसलाई राख्छ, राम्रोसँग लगेर राख्छ। अनि त्यो कति बेलादेखि पानी पिउन नपाएको, बिमारी अवस्थामा, अशक्त अवस्थामा रहेको मदनलाई पानी पिलाइदिन्छ, पानी पिलाइदिन्छ। अनि त्यो दयाको भावना उसले व्यक्त गर्छ। खोजेर ल्यायो वनको बुटी, घोटेर पिलायो, चौरीको दुध पिलाइकन बलियो बनायो। जङ्गलबाट उसले जडीबुटी खोजेर जडीबुटी जङ्गली त्यो वनस्पतिको के अरे जङ्गलको त्यो औषधिहरू खोजेर ल्याएर उसले वनौषधि खोजेर ल्याएर वनको औषधिहरू खोजेर ल्याएर उसले त्यो बुटीहरू जडीबुटीहरू ल्याएर घोटेर त्यसलाई दबाई बनाएर उसले पिलाइदिन्छ, मदनलाई पिलाइदिन्छ त्यो भोटे दाइले। अनि उसले चौरी पालेको छ, चौरी गाईको दुध, चौरीको दुध उसले पिलाउँछ अनि मदनलाई बलियो बनाउँछ, सक्षम बनाउँछ, सबल बनाउँछ, हिँड्न सक्ने बनाउँछ, आत्मनिर्भर बनाउँछ उसलाई। ऊ कमजोर अवस्थामा, बिमारले अशक्त अवस्थामा पुगेको मदनलाई बलियो बनाउँछ। हिमालको बुटी विचित्र थियो, जादुको दियो काम। अब हिमालको त्यो चिसो हावा, त्यो जङ्गलको वातावरण, स्वच्छ शान्त वातावरण, जङ्गली जडीबुटी, चौरी गाईको दुध, यो सबै कुराले मदनको शरीर स्वस्थ हुन धेरै समय लागेन। मदन छिटै जाती भयो, स्वस्थ भयो। उसलाई त्यो जादुको काम गर्यो त्यसले। जादु जस्तो केही दिनभित्रमा नै मदन जाती भयो। त्यो भोटे दैव नभए कठै जान्थे ती परमधाम। यदि त्यो भोटे बाटोमा नभेटेको भए, यदि बाटोमा हे ईश्वर, यदि मदनले त्यो भोटे दाई बाटोमा नभेटेको भए ऊ चाहिँ परमधाम जानु पर्थ्यो, अथवा ऊ चाहिँ अर्को धाममा अथवा स्वर्गवास हुनु पर्थ्यो। उसको निधन हुन्थ्यो, सायद बाटोमै उसको निधन हुन्थ्यो। उसलाई साथीहरूले पनि छोडेर गए, बिच बाटोमै साथीहरूले छोडेर गए। यस्तो अवस्थामा मदन सायद जङ्गलमै मर्ने थियो। तर एउटा भोटे दाईको सहाराले गर्दा मदन बाँच्न सक्यो। त्यो दैव समान, ईश्वर समान त्यो व्यक्ति चाहिँ, त्यो भोटे चाहिँ दैव समान व्यक्ति रहेछ, ईश्वर समान व्यक्ति रहेछ। र उसको कारणले गर्दा चाहिँ मदनको जीवन बाँच्न सक्यो, मदन स्वस्थ हुन सक्यो, मदन जाति हुन सक्यो भनेर महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले यो मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा शीर्षक कविताको माध्यमबाट हामीलाई मानवताको सन्देश दिने चेष्टा गरेका छन्। हामीभित्र पनि, हामी मानव हौँ, हामीभित्र पनि मानवताको भावना हुनुपर्छ। हामीले मानवीय कर्म गर्न सक्नुपर्छ। हाम्रोभित्र यदि कुनै धर्म छ हामीले गरेको भने त्यो चाहिँ मानवताको धर्म हामीभित्र रहनुपर्छ। हामीले एक आपसमा सहयोगको भावना राख्नुपर्छ। ती असहायहरूलाई, ती आर्तहरूलाई, ती दुःख पाएका व्यक्तिहरूलाई, ती असहायहरू जो हिँड्न सक्दैनन्, जो काम गर्न सक्दैनन्, जो अशक्त अवस्थामा छन्, ती अशक्त अवस्थामा रहेका व्यक्तिहरूलाई केही मात्रामा भए पनि हामीले सहयोग गर्न सक्यौँ भनेदेखि तिनीहरूको जीवन बाँच्नेछ भनेर महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले खुबै राम्रो सन्देश, मानवताको सन्देश यो कविताको माध्यमबाट दिएका छन्। र मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा शीर्षक कविताले हामीलाई हाम्रो जीवनमा पनि हामीले त्यस्ता असहायहरूलाई, त्यस्ता दुःख पाएका व्यक्तिहरूलाई, त्यस्ता समस्यामा परेका व्यक्तिहरूलाई सहयोग गर्नुपर्छ र हामीभित्र चाहिँ मानवता चाहिँ बाँच्नुपर्छ भन्ने कुरा खुबै मिठो तरिकाले, खुबै सरल तरिकाले व्यक्त गर्ने चेष्टा महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले यो कविताको माध्यमबाट गरेका छन्। र यसरी नै विद्यार्थीहरूलाई जसरी मैले हिजोको सेसनमा आग्रह गरेँ त्यसरी नै म आज पनि विद्यार्थीहरूलाई आग्रह गर्दछु, कविताको प्रत्येक लाइन राम्रोसँग पढ्ने, एक-एकवटा लाइन, एक-एकवटा शब्द विद्यार्थीहरूले राम्रोसँग पढ्ने। त्यसपछि यो कविताले भन्न चाहेको मूल भाव, कविताले के भन्न खोजेको छ, कविताले के सन्देश दिएको छ, मैले राम्रो प्रकारले विद्यार्थीहरूलाई व्याख्या गर्ने चेष्टा गरेँ, बुझाउने चेष्टा गरेको छु। विद्यार्थीहरूले सायद यो व्याख्याबाट, मैले बुझाएका कुराहरूबाट सायद सहज तरिकाले यो कविता बुझ्न सकेको म आशा गर्छु। र विद्यार्थीहरूले यसको प्रत्येक शब्द, प्रत्येक पङ्क्ति राम्रोसँग अध्ययन गरेर यसरी नै कुनै एउटा अवतरण, कुनै एउटा पङ्क्ति दिएको हुन्छ र त्यहाँबाट प्रश्न सोधिएको हुन्छ, विद्यार्थीहरूले राम्रोसँग तयार गरिदिने। महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको जन्म, महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको मृत्यु, महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटालाई किन आँसु कवि भनिन्छ, महाकवि लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाले कस्ता कृतिहरू लेखे, मुनामदन उनको कस्तो कृति हो, मुनामदन शीर्षक गीतिकाव्यबाट निकालिएको यो मदन भोटबाट फर्कँदा शीर्षक कविताले कस्तो सन्देश दिएको छ, यी कुराहरू विद्यार्थीहरूले खुबै ध्यानपूर्वक सुनेर, विचार गरेर आफ्नो कपीमा पनि लेखेर राख्ने अनि यसलाई राम्रोसँग अध्ययन गरेर आइसिएससी 2021 को निम्ति राम्रो तयारी गरेर बसिदिने 10औं श्रेणीका सम्पूर्ण विद्यार्थीहरूलाई म आग्रह गर्दछु र आगामी फेरि अर्को क्लासमा हामी अर्को कविता लिएर आउनेछौँ। एक दुईवटा कविताहरू बाँकी छ, त्यो कविताहरू पढिसकेपछि त्यसपछि विद्यार्थीहरूलाई कथा लाई म छोटकरीमा विद्यार्थीहरूलाई म जानकारी गराउनेछु। त्यसपछि भ्रमर उपन्यास छ, त्यो भ्रमर उपन्यासमाथि पनि म विस्तारपूर्वक विद्यार्थीहरूलाई जानकारी गराउनेछु र विद्यार्थीहरूले घरमा बसेर यो लकडाउनको समयमा बाहिर बेसी हो हल्ला, बाहिर अनावश्यक कुरोको निम्ति बजारतिर बेसी भिडभाड नगरिकन है घरमै बसेर पढिदिने अनि मोबाइलको यो सदुपयोग चाहिँ पढ्नको निम्ति अनलाइन क्लासको निम्ति सही प्रकारले प्रयोग गरिदिने सम्पूर्ण विद्यार्थीहरूलाई म आग्रह गर्दै 10औं श्रेणीको विद्यार्थीहरूलाई पुनः एकचोटि सुस्वास्थ्यको कामना, घरमै बसेर राम्रो पढिदिने अनि 2021 को परीक्षाको निम्ति राम्रो तयारी गरिदिने आग्रह गर्दै आज हामीले मदन बोर्डबाट शीर्षक कविता लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटाको पढ्यौँ। यसलाई राम्रो प्रकारले अध्ययन गरेर विद्यार्थीहरूले लेख्ने अभ्यासलाई निरन्तरता दिने आग्रह गर्दै आजको क्लासबाट म बिदा लिन चाहन्छु। धन्यवाद।
Hello and welcome to the second session of Civics. So we have been doing the chapter, the Union Legislature or the Union Parliament. In the previous class, I had discussed about the definition of the Parliament, which was a legislative body to make the laws. We also dealt about the powers and functions of the Speaker, plus we learned about the various parliamentary procedures and the comparative study between the two houses. So today, we are going to discuss on the topic, the powers and functions of the Parliament. So before I begin with that, I would like to give you a brief idea about the types of government. Now, there are two types of government. Unitary government and the second one is the federal government. So here it so happens that in a country there is a center, okay? There's a center and there are various states. So now here in the unitary form of government, the power lies with the center, which means that the laws are made by the center and that law is followed in all over the country. Now, in the federal structure, the power is divided between the center and each individual states. So here it means that both the center as well as the state, they have equal powers to make the laws. So therefore, unlike the unitary form of government, now here we learned that in the unitary form of government, the center is powerful than the states. The states are weak in comparison to the center, which is more powerful. But in the federal form of government, there are equal powers in the decision making. There are equal powers between the center and the state. Each individual states, they make their laws and the national decision is taken by the center. So an example that India, the federal form of government, India follows the federal structure where the power has been divided between the center and the states. Okay, so that was the type of government. Now, let's have a look at the display on the screen. Here you can see the three lists. Okay, the union list, the concurrent list, and the state list. And in each column you can see the different topics. So these are the subjects in which each union, concurrent, and state, they make the laws. So here, for subjects like foreign affairs, defense, railways, shipping, telephones, banking, currency, etc., it is the union who makes the law. The union or the center makes the laws mentioned in the subject. Then in the state list, now the state, they have the power to make laws for these subjects like the police, agriculture, hospitals, roads, fisheries, land revenue, etc. Now coming to the concurrent list. In the concurrent list, both the union or the center and the state, they have the right to make laws. Remember, please note that both the union and the state, they have the right to make laws in those subjects which have been mentioned under the concurrent list. So you can see that concurrent is common to both the union and the state, as both the center and the state make laws over these subjects. Okay, so these are just a few subjects that has been mentioned in the screen, that has been displayed in the screen. All right, now let us discuss the important topic for today, that is the powers and functions of the parliament. So the powers or the functions of the parliament has been divided into various subheadings. That is the legislative function. Next we have the financial function. Third, we have control over the executive. Fourthly, we have the judicial function. And lastly, we have the electoral function. Now let's discuss with the first one, that is the legislative function, the legislative power of the parliament, the union parliament. Now point number one, under the legislative function, it says that it has the right to make laws. That is, the parliament has the right to make laws over the 97 subjects which have been mentioned in the union list. As I had already shown you the various subjects in the screen. So here it is the parliament who makes laws over these subjects of the union list. Okay, the 97 subjects mentioned in the union list. Point number two, the parliament also has the power to make laws on the 67 subjects of the state list. The parliament also makes laws on the 67 subjects of the state list, but please remember that it can do so only in case of emergency. Emergency, like for example, the financial emergency, the constitutional emergency, or let's say if there is any threat, a war threat to a territory. So here, in case of emergency, it is the union parliament that has the right to make laws over the subjects mentioned in the state list, only during the case of emergency. Next, we have the residuary powers. Now, under the residuary powers, the parliament makes laws on those subjects which are not mentioned, please remember, which are not mentioned in any of the three lists, that is the union, the subjects are not mentioned either in the union or the concurrent or the state list. Okay, so that means the residuary powers. Under the residuary powers, the parliament makes laws on the subjects which are not mentioned in any of the three lists. Next, we have the concurrent list. Now here, the parliament has the right to make laws on those 47 subjects which are mentioned in the concurrent list. Okay, now let's take an example here. Let's say that the law has to be made on the subject of education. Okay, let's take an example on the subject education. So if the law has to be made, then the union can also make laws on the subject that is mentioned in the concurrent list, and the state can also make laws on the subject mentioned in the concurrent list. Please remember, here in this point, the parliament has the right to make laws on those 47 subjects which are mentioned in the concurrent list. Here, both the union, the center, and the state, they have the equal right to make laws. So as I said, as I had taken the example of education. So now here, in case of a conflict, okay, if there is any conflict, as I had already told you, both the state and the center, they are making laws on the subject of education. So here, if in case of conflict, if there is a conflict between the center and the state, then it is always the center which prevails. So it is always the union or the center that prevails over the state. Why? Because yes, though we learned about the federal structure, in the federal structure we had learned that the power has been divided between the center and the states, but in case of a conflict, always remember that since the center is powerful, it is the center that will prevail over whenever there is any conflict. And the last function under legislative power is the ordinance, regarding the ordinance. Now, what is this ordinance? So, ordinance is the order, okay? Ordinance is the order or the law that has been issued by the president. The order which has been issued by the president. Now, when can the president issue an order? When can the president do so? When can he pass the ordinance? So the president issues the order, the ordinance, when the parliament is not in session. Please remember, when the parliament is not in session. So we had learned in the previous class about the 3 sessions. The 3 sessions which are held in a year, okay? That was the budget session, the monsoon session, and the winter session. Now for an example, okay? Let's just assume that the budget session was held in the month of February. The monsoon session was held in the month of July. And the winter session was held in the month of November. This is just an assumption, okay? It's just an example. So here, the budget session held in the month of February, July, the monsoon session, and in the month of November, there was the winter session. But suppose if a law has to be made in the month of March, let's say a law has to be passed in the month of March when the parliament is not in session. Because as you can see, we had taken an example that the budget session was already held in the month of February, monsoon, July, and winter will be held in the month of November. So just think that if, suppose, a law has to be passed in the month of March, then, and in such a situation, okay, in such a time, it is the president who issues the order. I hope this is clear. It is the president who issues the ordinance, the order to pass a law when the parliament is not in session. As said in the example, that if the parliament is not in session in the month of March, then that law, if the law has to be passed in that month, then it is done by the president. So therefore, since the president issues this order when not in session, when the parliament is not in session, therefore, it can be also said or taken as a temporary law. Now, the parliament, in order to make this law as permanent, in order to make this temporary law passed by the president as a permanent law, the parliament has to pass this bill. The parliament has to first pass the bill in order to make the law permanent. I hope that is clear. So that was the legislative function. Next, we have the financial functions now. Now, under the financial function, the first point is the annual budget. So it is the parliament. The parliament passes the annual budget. What is this annual budget? It is a statement. It is a statement of the sources of income and expenditure of the coming year. Okay? So the annual budget is passed by the parliament. Next point under the financial function is the imposition of taxes. Now, in order to impose a tax, the approval of the parliament is required. So the Parliament approves the proposal to impose the tax. Without the decision or approval of the Parliament, no one can impose the tax. Next comes the salaries. So under the salaries now, the salaries of the ministers or the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the High Court or the judges, the salaries of these ministers, they are decided by the Parliament. So it is the Parliament who decides the salaries of the ministers and the other higher officials. Now, these salaries are taken from the Consolidated Fund of India. The salaries of the ministers, the salaries that has been given to the judges, the salaries which are being given to the Chief Justice of the High Court and the Supreme Court comes from the Consolidated Fund of India. Now, what is this Consolidated Fund of India? The Consolidated Fund are the funds that has been collected from the people. Okay, the tax that the people pay as income tax goes under the Consolidated Fund. Or let's say the taxes which are being paid by the bigger companies, that is the corporate tax, it all goes under the Consolidated Fund. So the government, from these Consolidated Fund, the government uses these Consolidated Fund to build or repair the roads, the parks, or let's say the salaries also are taken from the Consolidated Fund of India. So I hope this financial function is clear, where the annual budget is passed by the Parliament, the imposition of the taxes is also decided by the Parliament, and the salaries of the ministers are also decided by the Parliament. Now moving on to the third function of the Parliament, that is control over the executive. So the Parliament is the controlling body of the government. Okay, the Parliament controls the executive members, which means the Parliament controls the ministers by using the various motions like the no confidence, question hour, adjournment, cut motion. These three, no confidence, question hour, the adjournment motion, which we had already done in the previous class. Okay, so let's do with the first one, that is the no confidence motion. As I had already told you in the previous class, what the meaning of no confidence is, which means the ministers, they enjoy the power, they gain the power, they remain in their position as long as they get the majority support, as long as they get the confidence of the majority. So here, how does the Parliament control the executive now? So the Parliament has the power to remove the ministers from their position. The Parliament has the power to remove the ministers from their power by passing the vote of no confidence. And once the ministers decide in favor of the no confidence motion, we already know that the ministry has to resign. The whole ministry has to resign. So that was the no confidence motion. Now moving on to the next one, that is the question hour. Question hour, which is the first hour of the working day, which has been reserved for asking questions. So here, under the question hour, the members of the Parliament, they have the power, they have the privilege, they have the right to ask questions to the ministers regarding matters of public importance. Okay, so that was the question hour. Next, the third point under the control over the executive is the adjournment motion. The adjournment motion, which means to postpone the daily affairs and to discuss the important or the emergency matters. So here, in the adjournment motion, the Parliament, the members of the Parliament brings before the government the important matters. Okay, so the important matters are brought to the government by the members of the Parliament, and after that the adjournment motion takes place. And the fourth function is the cut motion. Now the cut motion means the Parliament has the right to reject. The Parliament has the power to reject any bill or the budget which has been proposed by the cabinet ministers. So these were the points under the control over the executive, where the Parliament has the right to remove the ministers by passing the vote of no confidence, where the members of the Parliament, they have the right to ask the questions to the ministers, where the members of the Parliament brings before the government the important matters to be discussed, and the Parliament also has the right to reject a bill or any budget. Moving on to the fourth function of the Parliament now. So under the fourth function, we have the judicial function. So the judicial function means where the Parliament gets the right to impeach. Now what is this? What is the meaning of the term impeach? Impeachment means to remove. So therefore, the Parliament under the judicial power, they have the right to impeach or remove the President or any other high officials if they are found guilty of violating the provisions of the Constitution. But yes, for these also, in order to remove the President or any other high officials also, there is a certain procedure which we will be dealing in the next chapter. So if the Parliament finds that the President or any other high officials, they are guilty, they are misusing their power, they are they are violating the provisions of the Constitution, then the Parliament has the right to remove or impeach those ministers. And lastly, we have the electoral function. Now, the Parliament, using the electoral function, the electoral power, maintains the electoral duties. Okay, they take charge, the Parliament takes charge of the electoral duties. The electoral duties, using the power, they can elect the President, they can also elect the Vice President, and they can also elect the Speaker. So, which means that both the houses of the Parliament, electing of the President and the Vice President, it means where both the houses, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, together they elect the President and the Vice President. And regarding the election of the Speaker, we had already learned about it in the previous class, where we had discussed that the Speaker is elected from amongst its own members. Therefore, the Lok Sabha members elect the Speaker. So these were the various powers, the functions of the Parliament: the legislative, the financial, the control over the executive, the judicial function, and lastly, the electoral function. So I hope, children, you have understood today's lesson. Therefore, I would like you to open your books, go through the chapter, revise it, and in the next class, we will be dealing with relationship between the two houses. Thank you.
A very good morning to one and all. Today I'm here to start with the next chapter, that is chapter number 5 on soil resources of India. Now, what is soil? Right? The most important thing first here to understand is what soil is all about. Okay? As I've already mentioned over there, soil is a mixture of both inorganic and organic components. But before that, soil is the loose material which is found on the topmost layer of the earth. And apart from that, there are various factors which contribute to the formation of soil. Like there are changes in the, like we have done the changes in the temperature, we have relief features, vegetation, okay? Apart from that, running water, which plays a very important role in the formation of soil. Now you see up here, it's mentioned, composition of soil, I've mentioned over there, okay? That is, it is a mixture of inorganic and organic materials. Now what is the inorganic components? Inorganic components comprises of silica, clay and chalk. That is inorganic. An organic component is humus, which is not a mineral. Humus is the decomposition of vegetable matter and which is not a mineral, but it is a very, very important component in the formation of soil. It depends upon that, right? Now, before we carry on with the erosion and conservation, these are certain things that I've just mentioned. What are the important things to be covered in this particular chapter? But before that, there are some technical terms. Now, the first one is pedogenesis. Pedogenesis is the process of soil formation. All right? The process of soil formation takes place either where it is found, like it's known as the in situ soil, or ex situ, that is the transported one, right? So, pedogenesis is the entire process from the hard rocks to the formation of the loose material soil that forms the topmost layer. The topmost layer is formed. That is pedogenesis. It's a term, right? Now, the next one is in situ. In situ means soil which is found where they are formed. Like, for example, the black soil. Black soil is found in its place of its origin because it disintegrates from the underlying parent rock, and finally the topmost soil is found to be very, very fertile, the black soil. Red soil is the same. It takes place due to weathering of the rocks. All right? And laterite soil is formed because of the leaching process that takes place strictly under monsoon conditions altogether. Right? The next one is ex situ, which is, I've mentioned here, transported, which means soil which is carried down by agents, which is totally carried down either by wind or mostly by water. For example, the alluvial soil that forms the entire northern plains, which is a very, very fertile plain, which is also known as the food bowl of India, right in the north, okay? This is formed by the alluvial soil, and what is the main agent over here? It is the water. The mighty rivers, the perennial rivers of the north that flow down, carries all the valuable silt and the fertile soil that is spread over. As it comes down to the plains, it gets enough time for sedimentation. So that's how the sediments get deposited. Now we come to another important portion over here, important point, that is humus. As I've already explained, it is an organic material which increases the fertility of the soil. So it is not a mineral, okay? Let me mention that. It is not a, humus is not a mineral, right? Then we come to another part, leaching. Okay, another point, a term that is, it is the removal of valuable material, nutrients from the topsoil, making it infertile. Because see, when we talk about the soil profile, we have the topsoil, we have the subsoil, then we have the bedrock, parent. Okay, so the most important part is the topmost part, that is the topsoil. So if this topsoil gets washed away or blown away, that directly affects the fertility of the soil. If the topsoil is washed away or blown away, then you know this will directly affect the agricultural sector or any kind of cropping or whatever that is to be done. Okay, because it depends upon the topsoil. So it gets removed. So that is called leaching. Then we have, this comes under alluvial soil. These are two terms, alluvial soil, Bhangar and Khadar. Okay. Now Bhangar is the older alluvium, mostly containing conquered. Now see, there are general terms in geography. There are general terms that are mentioned. Okay, conquered means, you know, in Hindi, right? In general term, conquered means small gravels or pebbles. Okay, or smaller than that, very fine particles, not soil, but little bigger in size than the loose soil. So that is conquered. Found above the flood level of the rivers, normally above 30 meters and above in the upper region. It's not very fertile. Then the last one over here is Khadar. Okay, Khadar means it is newer alluvium containing of silt, which is found along the lower levels near the rivers. So this is the newer alluvium, and it's replenished every year by the rivers during the time of the monsoons. Okay, so these are certain technical terms, or these are certain terms to be remembered, to be kept in mind. So if you have your books in front of you, and if you're watching it, you can just underline these, because sometimes they ask you for definitions on what is pedogenesis, or define the following terms, like, excuse me, perogenesis, or in situ, ex situ, or humus, or it could be any of these terms together. Okay, so please keep a note of this. Right? Okay, now we move on with the next one, that is soil erosion, which is a very, very important factor, or a very important thing to be remembered in this for this particular chapter, because erosion of the soil means removal of the topsoil by different agents of weathering. Okay, like running water I've mentioned, wind, overgrazing, 40 methods of agriculture, and deforestation. So these are certain ways, or these are certain things that actually contributes to the removal of the soil. That is erosion, soil erosion that can take place. Okay. Now let me go one by one. Running water. Running water is a very important point, or a very important factor which actually contributes to the soil erosion to take place on a very, very large scale. Right. Now running water, there are three types. There are three types. The first one is gully erosion. We have the splash erosion. Okay, gully erosion, splash erosion, and finally we have the sheet erosion also. All right, so these are three different ways that comes under running water where erosion takes place. So that is gully erosion, sheet erosion, splash erosion. Okay, so you have to remember these three, like what are the three ways by which running water is responsible for soil erosion. Okay, these three terms. Right. Then we move on with the next one, that is wind. Wind is also another important fact which leads to, especially this kind of a phenomena, the erosion of the land or the topsoil by wind is seen mostly in the arid and semi-arid regions. If you look at the deserts, I think you've come across certain terms called desertification. Okay, desertification. It actually means land degradation. And this takes place in those areas where the where overgrazing takes place, or there are 40 methods, or some kind of a way in which the soil gets the land gets degraded. Not soil, but the land gets degraded. So wind erosion, that takes place normally in the desert. That's why along the periphery of the deserts or the semi-desert region, we have the shelter belts, or we have the wind belts. Okay, that actually this is a way in order to prevent the expansion of the desert further inland. So that is one of the factor. Okay, that is wind. Then we have overgrazing. And another factor is again overgrazing. Overgrazing by animals also leads to soil erosion because the vegetation cover gets removed. So it will be more susceptible to any agent of erosions, mostly in the arid region, that is wind. Okay. Then we have 40 method of agriculture. Now, all of you all must have somewhere studied about shifting agriculture, also called the slash and burn practice, which is mostly in the hills of Northeast, and to name a place in Assam, right, where this kind of a agricultural practice takes place, which is also called jhuming or slash and burn, which is a very faulty method of agriculture, which has been banned by the government, but still it is in practice till date. Okay. Then we have deforestation. All of us, we are aware of what is deforestation. Globally, it's taking place. Deforestation is the indiscriminate cutting, or the actual term would be felling of the trees for various uses. All right. But in India, the system is that being a tropical country, India being a tropical country, the vegetation cover, the forest cover that we are supposed to have, we have not reached that. In fact, we are less. The percentage is less. The forest cover is less in a country. So that is deforestation. So soil erosion, what are the agents of weathering? Running water. We have wind, overgrazing, faulty methods of agriculture, and finally deforestation. Right. So that is to do with your erosion. So here you have to study or remember what is soil erosion, a definition, and what are the various agents of soil erosion. Right. Now we move on with opposite to that, what we have done right now, erosion of the soil. Now, that is conservation, soil conservation. What is soil conservation? Okay, conserve means to protect, right? So conservation of soil means it is to prevent the erosion of soil by practicing various ways and methods in order to make sure that we protect or prevent soil from being eroded. That is what is soil conservation, right? Now, it mentioned over there, it is an effort made by man, definitely, to prevent soil erosion and retain its fertility. Because see, we cannot survive without food. But where does the food come from? The food that we eat on a daily basis, okay? It comes from the agricultural sector. So agriculture depends upon the fertility of the soil. So that is why it is very important to conserve or to protect the soil from being eroded, right? So soil conservation, again here you have to know the definition of it. That is, it is an effort made by man in order to prevent soil erosion, and not only to prevent soil erosion but to retain its fertility. To retain the fertility, it's very important, right? Now, measures adopted by the government in order to prevent what prevention? Soil being eroded. So what are the methods adopted by the government to practice this? That is soil conservation. First one is afforestation. Afforestation means the planting of saplings. You cannot plant a tree, but you can have the planting of saplings in places where the land is devoid of any vegetation, right? So that is afforestation. Now, opposite, if you see the erosion part, deforestation is there, afforestation. Overgrazing is there, again over here, to check overgrazing. So in most of the developed countries, they have separate grazing grounds for animals. The grazing grounds are there. So that's how they practice. So that's how they have their kind of livestock farming, that is they practice in the countryside or in some of these open areas, okay, that is in the developed nations. Here we don't have such kind of practices, right? Not much. Now, construction of dams and barrages. So the construction of dams prevent the soil from being eroded. The only problem in the construction of dams is, especially in the rivers or the perennial rivers, the flowing rivers throughout the year, is the problem of silting that has to be looked after. Now, improved techniques of agriculture. Improved techniques of agriculture means there are ways and means by, like for example, one is crop rotation. Okay, crop rotation means where the land is not left fallow or empty, but there's a continuous process throughout the year, because there's some kind of vegetables, there's some crops that can be grown only in a particular season. That is why we have the Rabi crop and the Kharif crops, right? But they have a continuous rotation of the crop. The main purpose of crop rotation is to make sure that the land is not left empty. If the land is left empty without any vegetation cover, what will happen? It will lead to any kind of erosion, right? So that is the thing. And banning of shifting agriculture. I already explained to you what is shifting agriculture. That is the slash and burn, or it's also called in general term, it's called jhuming, which is practiced in Northeast India. So I hope you know what's shifting agriculture. Let me just brief you about it. Shifting agriculture means where people, they make a clearing in the forest. They have some kind of agricultural practice. After a few years, when the soil loses its fertility, it moves to another part of the forest. Again, they practice with some kind of agriculture. They carry on for a few years. Okay? After that, again, they move to another part of the forest. So continuously, they are shifting the agricultural plot from one place to another. But the places which have been left empty, they leave it as it is, exposed to agents of weathering. So that is called shifting agriculture, right? So here we have done soil erosion. I'm going slow with this. Soil conservation. Here you have to know the definition of what is soil erosion, what is soil conservation, right? And the various factors. So that is most important in this particular part, that is erosion and conservation, right? Now, we move on with the major soil groups of India. Here, major soil groups of India. I'll read it out for you here. India is a country with varied conditions of geology, relief, that's structure, climate, as we all know, vegetation, different types. So, hence, India has a variety of soil groups different from each other, but you have to understand how each other on the basis of their origin, how is it formed, its color differs from one and the other, the texture differs, the fertility also differs, and the chemical composition also differs from one and the other, right? Now, Indian soil is divided into two groups, that is, soil of peninsular India, which is called in situ. What have I mentioned here, in situ? Which is found where they are formed, found in its place of origin, simple as that. In situ soil is found in its place of origin. So it is formed from the disintegration of the parent rock. So it's called residual soil also, or it's called in situ, or the word residual, right? They are this type of soil, one, Peninsular India, right? The next one is soils of the northern plains. That is also transported, or in other words, you can term it as ex situ soil. Ex situ or transported, that is soil which is carried down by agents, various agents like wind, water, and I already told you that the alluvial soil of the northern plains, the fine soil that you find in the northern plains of India, okay, which is called the food bowl, the structure, it is formed because of the running rivers that flow, the perennial rivers, the mighty rivers of the north that come down, carry down volumes and volumes, okay. Apart from that, it comes down and it deposits in the low-lying regions, right? Okay. Now we come to the classification of soils. Classification, okay, I've already explained to you over here, I've already told you that each and every soil differs in the quality, texture, chemical composition, in its origin, formation. So accordingly, a survey was done. A survey was done in India, that was in 1953. The All India Soil Survey Committee set up ICAR, which is called the Indian Council of Agricultural Research. So this particular organization that was set up by the government, the committee that was set up in 1953, classified soils into 4 types. The soils have been classified into 4 types: alluvial soil, black soil, laterite soil, and red soil. So this much for today. We'll continue with the classification and the characteristic of the soils tomorrow. So till then, stay safe and have a good day. Thank you.